Hello, this is a video to go over Chapter 2 in Management Business 137 for the online classes. The evolution of management. How did we get to where we are today? So one of the things about management is economies of scale. So if you don't know what economies of scale is, so basically reductions in the average cost of a unit as the total volume produces increases. Okay. So what does that mean? Okay. So Walmart, Verizon, Target, they all have economies of scale. What we mean by economies of scale is, let's pretend you're a bakery and you have a really large kitchen. Okay. So if you yourself can make 30 cupcakes a day, you and your partner get in there, you can do 60. You can get up to let's say 250 cupcakes an hour with a bunch of people. But once you get here, say that's, we'll just say it's 10 people can be in the kitchen, right? Once you get to the 11th person, your output per person becomes less because you've ever heard the phrase, too many cooks in the kitchen. Okay. So that's what we mean by economies of scale. And it really does help firms save money because they are ending up with more output, but their cost per unit is lower. So different approaches to management, systematic management, specific procedures and processes that would ensure coordination. So the main goal was to meet high demand brought about due to the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't really efficient because they kind of hadn't figured out all the kinks yet. So goals were achieved through duties and responsibilities. And this was important then because prior to that, prior to the Industrial Revolution, there wasn't a ton of business. People worked in farms. And then with the growth of cities and manufacturing, we started working we would go to work, right? Instead of just go to the farm. And so standardization techniques, specific means of gathering, handling, transmitting, and then watching how much we spent. What was our accounting, our wages? How much did we produce? How much was wasted? Those were all things that were really important. So the next thing we're going to talk about is scientific management. So this is the one best way by Frederick Taylor. If you don't know anything about Frederick Taylor, he's kind of an interesting guy. He came from a very wealthy family. My memory serves me right. His father never worked a day in his life. However, that's not the way Frederick Taylor wanted to do it. And he watched people do work. And he found what the one best way to do work to be most efficient was. And so we call this the scientific method. And so he also came up with the idea of incentivizing workers for paying for work that was done in excess of the standard level of output. So if your job's description said you need to create 100 blocks of lumber a day, that's your quota. And say at the end of the day, you created 110. You might get paid, say 10 cents for those extra 10, and you've got an extra $1. Incentivizing people to work harder and work to be more efficient. 4 principles, precise scientific approach, scientifically select, train, teach, and develop. So each person has the right job. Okay, so Henry Gantt was a protege of Frederick Taylor, and so we said that Frederick Taylor came up with this piece rate system where you would get incentivized for anything over the norm. And then but Gantt said that the frontline supervisor should receive a bonus for each of their workers who completed their daily assigned tasks. Well, what's the point of that? Well, if you can incentivize your workers to work harder, then you're doing a good job as a manager. And we want to also incentivize the managers to do that as well. Okay. So Gantt came up with the Gantt chart as well, which is often used in project management. So I used to work in clinical research. And so we use these a lot because, so if that's the first thing that is going to happen, you can see how all these other things downflow from there. Well, what happens if this gets pushed back a week? How do all the other dates? Are you going to be behind, or are you going to be able to catch up at some point? Right. So that's kind of what a Gantt chart allows you to do. Frank and Lillian Gilbreth used motion studies to avoid wasteful movements. So they suggested that a nurse would assist a doctor during surgery to make them more efficient. So you wouldn't have wasteful movements. If you think about, if you just, I mean, all I know is from a TV show because I've never been in an actual operating room. But if, you have your doctor and then they turn to their nurse and they say scalpel, right? So they don't move from where they are during their surgery, but the nurse is there to assist them so they can become more efficient. Bureaucracy, a classical management approach, emphasizing structured, formal network. It's efficient, but can be difficult to dismantle, and it's not very flexible. So, the federal government is a good example of bureaucracy, and it can be difficult to dismantle, and it's not very flexible. Division of labor, authority, qualifications, ownership, rules, and controls. These are all characteristics of an effective bureaucracy. Who does the labor, right? If you're a boss or you're a manager, do you have authority to tell your employees they're doing a good job, they're doing a bad job? Do you have the authority to make decisions? So Fayol had 14 principles of management, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I did want to kind of discuss them quickly in that prior to this time, we consider these really standard today if you work somewhere. But prior to that time, they weren't so standard. So division of work, divide work into specialized tasks and assign responsibilities to specific individuals. Okay, Tom, you are a great sales associate. We want you working the floor. Or, Michelle, you're really great with customers. We want you working on the customer service desk. Authority, make sure if you're a manager, you have authority to make decisions. Unity of command. This one's really important. Each employee should be assigned to only one supervisor. If you have two supervisors, it gets confusing. Who do you report to? So you guys can read through that, but I did kind of want to mention a couple of them. The concept of human relations, a classical management approach that attempted to understand how human psychological and social processes interact. Today, we understand that an employee is more than just the business of them being an employee. You have to understand that the social that goes along with that as well. And that's why we have these human relations, sometimes called HR departments, to manage the people, right? Because a lot of times you'll hear that the people are the most valuable part of the workforce. I'm sure you've heard about Abraham Maslow, and if you've taken any other business classes, but he suggested humans have 5 levels of needs, right? So physical, and then is the lowest, and self-actualization is the highest. And so what he says is that people cannot move from one to the other until the lower level is satisfied. So physical needs could be things as food, water, shelter. If you don't have food, water, and shelter, you don't care about social. You don't care about, am I doing the best of my abilities? Am I working up in my career? No, you care about getting some food and some water and go in a warm place. Okay. The Hawthorne effect. So basically what this says is that if somebody is watching you, you're going to do a better job, right? So if your boss is looking over your shoulder, maybe it'll be more like this picture on the left. If your boss is not looking over your shoulder, maybe you'll be looking on Facebook or Instagram or ESPN or whatever your guilty pleasure is, to spend time in the day. Quantitative management emphasizes the application of quantitative analysis. So forecasting, break-even analysis, inventory modeling. You're using numbers to make decisions. The downside of doing this can be that the numbers, you make a lot of assumptions with numbers. So it's not always going to be correct, but it's good to be used in a supplemental form. Organizational behavior studies management activities that promote employee effectiveness. What makes employees work better? So theory X, self-fulfilling prophecy. These type of managers think that employees are inherently lazy and do not want to work. A lot of times they get employees that are like that because they're constantly over their shoulder. Theory Y says, we've hired the best person to do this job and we're going to let them do this job. Contingency perspective, that managerial strategies, structures, processes can depend. Every situation is different. Every person is different. Every group of people working together are different. And sometimes you have to use different strategies. All right, that's it for chapter 2. Hope this was helpful.